All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the brain injury discussion. This is your host, Jay. Today, we are going to talk about brain injury and neuroplasticity. If you ever pick up any of the brain injury guides or any of the literature for those who are either in the brain injury world, you'll probably hear the word neuroplasticity a lot, and we're going to cover that. But like always, sources will be in the description below. We'd appreciate if you look up those sources. They're good and scientific. Also, we'd appreciate if you subscribe to the channel. Maybe give this video a like. And also leave a comment down below. Maybe there's a question you have, or maybe you have a suggestion for a future topic. We'd love to hear those suggestions for future topics as well. We want people, I would like to know what you guys want to see. And so that way we can make it tailored to what you guys want. So, but with that being said, we have a lot to get into, so let's get started. So, first, we need to talk about what is neuroplasticity. Let's break that word down first. So, neuro, so that is um, pertaining to the nervous system and the brain, and plasticity, which is the ability to bend and move and to adapt. And so if someone is, you know, kind of like how plastic can be molded and bended into an object. So if we take that word and combine it, we get neuroplasticity, or the ability for the brain to adapt. And per the definition, per Stat Pearls, which is sourced down here and in the description below, neuroplasticity is adaptive structural and functional changes to the brain, which in turn means that the brain can start rewiring itself. Okay, so starting to create new pathways for information to be channeled. Again, your brain is a huge network of pathways. It makes our interstate system look very simple and plain. But really, what it's doing is it's reorganizing the structure and neurons. So that way, if there's a blockage on Interstate 95 near Fredericksburg, obviously I got to find a way around it. And there's no beltway there. So maybe I got to take Route 1 instead, or vice versa. Maybe I just, this is a way, a metaphor of saying, yes, the brain needs to adapt when there's a stoppage there. But it's also a form of healing, and it's reconnecting those broken connections. So that's just a way of saying that, yes, the brain has the ability to do some repair to itself. Okay, so it's not like you're going to go from day of stroke back to day before stroke the next day. We're talking about a very slow process here, but this is still something that can happen. So let's continue and let's talk about neuroplasticity and a stroke. Again, um, the greatest or most important time window for strokes, is 3 to 6 months out. And that's when you get the greatest recovery possible. And so what happens is it's remapping of the brain function. So as we can see in this graphic here, if the stroke happens here, these vessels here and here do not get oxygen supply if there's a clot there or stoppage of blood flow. And so information that would otherwise just go from one area, pass through that area, instead it has to work through a completely different area. So it's kind of like taking a detour. You're creating those fresh and new neural pathways. So again, think about different roads that you might have to take when the superhighway is shut down for some odd reason. Again, you're rerouting, and this is basically fresh maps. This can be observed under a functional MRI, probably a SPECT scanner as well. But this source here specified functional MRI. So if you have in the world of a brain injury, if you have someone who's had a stroke or maybe has shown some recovery, or maybe their recovery has slowed, this might be something to ask for with your neurologist. Again, just another piece of that information that maybe a case manager for brain injury should know. And again, stroke or a cerebrovascular accident is a significant change in brain mapping. Again, when you halt the blood supply, even for a very short period of time, it causes tremendous damage. because then those cells in those areas aren't getting the oxygen and nutrients that they need. And so it is a very significant change. So let's move on and let's talk about neuroplasticity with traumatic brain injury or TBI. Now, per the definition, I pulled this quote from this source down here. It says that neuroplasticity is the ability for neuronal circuits to make adaptive changes on both structural and functional level. Again, we see that repeated. It's structural and functional. And this also ranges from molecular, synaptic, and cellular changes. So, again, those very small changes to even more global network changes. The brain is like a computer in a sense, where it's like, or maybe a cloud. And so, a computerized cloud where, yes, the information is just put there, but it's put there in a certain order. Just like when you look at a map of the state, you'll find out that yes, Fredericksburg is in between DC and Richmond. Fredericksburg is not somewhere else. You can't just pick up that town and move it. And the same thing goes with the brain. If you halt the blood supply to a part of the brain, um, you'll have to reroute the information in the metaphorical Richmond to DC um, around the area of the either impact into the form of traumatic brain injury or stroke or whatever. But we do see that there is an ability to reroute information and create new connections. This source also pointed to stem cell and antioxidant therapy, which again shows some promising results for those who've had a traumatic brain injury. But the end all be all when it comes to this source, it says that recovery is usually long and slow, but possible. And that's something that we need to keep in mind, especially as brain injury case managers. We need to keep in mind that recovery, yes, long, yes, slow, but possible. Okay. It's not necessarily that you get a brain injury and that life changes. It will change, but recovery is possible. We need to keep our positivity up on that aspect. So let's continue on and let's talk about where neuroplasticity might be in the future. Again, we might see some new cutting edge rehabilitation techniques being explored. Again, new technology, kind of like last week's video on AI, new technology might be able to help people with neuroplasticity after a traumatic brain injury, after a stroke, after an overdose, who knows, right? And so we do see that brain computer interfaces, or BCIs, are being explored and they're showing some promising results. Um, Again, there's multiple types, as we can see here, multiple types of electric ways that we can do that, multiple types of stimulation. But this is also good for a virtual reality system. Again, if you can uh, put on virtual reality goggles and see and interact with things in a virtual world, that creates a way to help stimulate the brain. And so this could possibly be the future of neurorehabilitation is technology in games. And then we also see that there are brain stimulations that are non-invasive. Again, this whole graphic here is certain ways that people can either look through and see about stimulation for the brain to help facilitate neuroplasticity. And like everything in medicine, there are always new pharmaceutical inventions being created and tested. Again, this is a field that's going to be continually growing because brain injury is quite wide and expansive. And so this might create incentives for new technology, new medications, new therapies. And so these are things that, again, case managers, we need to be up to date on these kind of things. We can't just ignore and live in the time where we first got trained. We need to keep ourselves up to date with the information that is available. So, what does this lead me as a brain injury case manager to conclude? Well, first, neuroplasticity, it exists, and some recovery can be made after a brain injury. Again, that might take time, it might be slow, but it's possible. Again, newer technologies are coming for neuroplasticity. We need to be aware of them. We need to be aware that they not only exist, but maybe we should look into how do we get our clients or our people per se to those therapies, and do they qualify? Do you think this would be helpful? Maybe we can ask the neurologist together, hey, do you think that we should try this? Again, part of advocacy is knowing what exists. Somewhat understood now, again, somewhat, but there's going to be continued knowledge and understanding to come. Again, just because I'm making this presentation now doesn't mean that, months from now or years from now, that this will all be up to date. Maybe there will be a breakthrough in the future. And so that's why it's important to say, yes, we need to keep an eye on what is coming down the line so it may benefit our clients. And my final point is that brains can or may heal, but it may take time and it may take some help as well. So, again, that's why I emphasize prevention, but also let's look at what we can do for people. But, anyways, with that being said, here are my references. These are all very interesting articles. I would, if you want to dive deeper, feel free to do so. Also, I'd appreciate if you like this video. We do appreciate when we get thumbs ups on these videos, and maybe leave a comment down below. Maybe there's something about neurorehabilitation or neuroplasticity, maybe a question or comment, or maybe you've been through something like this. We'd like to hear your feedback, or maybe you have a suggestion for an upcoming video topic. We'd love to hear that as well. But with that being said, feel free to subscribe to the channel. We put out this information weekly. We try to keep it applicable, but also educational. But with that being said, I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and don't forget, protect your brains.